I had just come back from the gym, the door still swinging behind me, when I heard Jennifer's voice from the living room. But it wasn't the usual, "Hey, babe," or "How was your day?" No, this time it was different. There on the couch, she was sitting with her phone in her hand, scrolling through messages. What caught my eye wasn't the phone, it was the name on the screen. Ethan. I froze for a second. Ethan. That was the name of the guy from her yoga class, the one she always laughed off as just a friend. But there was something off in her behavior today. Something wasn't right. As I stood there, trying to catch my breath, she quickly pressed the phone down onto the couch cushion as if she had just realized I was standing there. She tried to play it off, flashing me that smile I'd seen 1,000 times before. But this time, it didn't comfort me. It sent a cold shiver down my spine. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, her voice sweet but with an edge of panic in it. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I slowly walked over to where she was sitting. My hands were clammy, my mind racing, but I needed answers. What was going on? Why was she acting like this? And why was Ethan texting her? It didn't take long before I saw her hesitate. "Who's Ethan?" I asked, keeping my tone even but stern. Her face froze. For just a split second, I saw her glance at her phone, then back at me. Her smile faded. The mask was slipping. "Oh, just some guy from the gym," she said quickly, brushing it off as if it didn't matter. "You know how it is." But I didn't buy it. Something in her voice didn't match her words. Her usual ease was gone. This wasn't some innocent friendship. The way she had tensed up when I asked about Ethan told me everything I needed to know. The pieces were falling into place. I had to find out more. But I also knew I was standing on the edge of something that would change everything. I couldn't let it go. The words echoed in my mind. Just some guy from the gym. That was her excuse. But it didn't add up. Jennifer was never the type to get close to someone without me knowing about it. She would have told me about Ethan, wouldn't she? I thought back to every moment, every little detail that seemed so innocent at the time. The late nights at the office, the constant texting during dinner, the girls' weekends she seemed to take more and more often. All those little things that I had brushed off as her being busy or caught up with life. But now, as I sat across from her, everything felt different. I could no longer pretend that everything was fine. The trust one had placed in her, the life we had built together, was hanging by a thread. I couldn't just let it slide anymore. "So, you're telling me Ethan's just a friend?" I repeated, my voice more steady than I felt. Jennifer looked at me, eyes wide, as if she hadn't expected me to press her. "Yes, that's all," she said, but her smile was forced, the edges of her lips twitching nervously. I wasn't convinced. I had to know the truth. But I couldn't ask her directly again. She was too good at lying, too practiced at twisting things around. I needed evidence. I needed something concrete that would make her face the reality of what was happening. I spent the next few hours thinking, watching, trying to gather the courage to confront her again. She was acting as if nothing had happened. It was maddening. The normalcy of her behavior made everything worse. How could she be so calm? How could she lie to me with such ease? The next morning, I woke up early, unable to sleep. The house was quiet, and Jennifer was still asleep next to me. I watched her, her hair spread out on the pillow, her face peaceful, as if the world hadn't just shifted beneath our feet. She was pretending everything was fine, but I couldn't ignore the feeling in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't how our marriage was supposed to be. I quietly got out of bed, trying not to wake her, and went into the living room. I needed to think. I needed a plan. I couldn't just sit back and wait for things to unravel without taking action. That's when I remembered the phone. Her phone was still charging on the kitchen counter. I knew I shouldn't do it. I knew it was wrong to invade her privacy like that. But my hands shook as I picked it up. I didn't care anymore. I had to know. I unlocked it, and my heart raced as I scrolled through her messages. Most of them were normal, harmless. But then I found it. A string of texts between Jennifer and Ethan. The messages weren't innocent. They were full of flirtation, jokes, and even plans to meet up. One message stood out. "I'll be waiting for you tonight. Don't let him know. I need you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt the air leave my lungs. She had been seeing him, hiding it from me, lying to my face. All those times I trusted her, all those late nights when I thought she was working late or out with friends, had been spent with him. I felt sick. I had never been this betrayed in my life. But it wasn't just the messages that crushed me. It was the realization that I had been blind. I had allowed myself to trust her, to believe in us, when she had been deceiving me the entire time. I couldn't think straight. Anger and hurt surged through me, mixing together in a way I couldn't describe. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to scream at her, to demand answers. But something inside me told me to wait. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble in front of her. I wasn't going to let her see how much it hurt. Instead, I decided to play it cool. I'd wait until the right moment. Jennifer woke up a few hours later, and as she entered the kitchen, I acted like nothing was wrong. I greeted her with a smile, as if nothing had changed. But inside, everything had changed. My heart was heavy with the truth, and I could barely look at her without feeling the urge to lash out. She was making coffee, humming to herself like she always did. She didn't seem to have a care in the world. How could she be so calm? Didn't she know that everything was falling apart? "Morning," she said, her voice still warm. "Morning," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. We ate breakfast in silence, the weight of the unspoken words hanging between us. I could feel the distance growing with each passing second. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed more time. I needed to make sure I had all the facts before I confronted her. I was going to catch her in the act, in a way she couldn't deny. Then, and only then, would I confront her. I would make her face the truth. But little did I know, things were about to spiral out of control. I spent the next few days in a haze, running on fumes, as the weight of Jennifer's betrayal hung over me like a storm cloud. Every word she spoke felt like a lie, every glance too calculated. I couldn't help but wonder how many more lies had been woven into the fabric of our relationship. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the deceit. She had made me believe she was my partner, my best friend, but now I realized she had been hiding another life from me. I had to know the truth, and I was determined to confront her once and for all. The opportunity came one evening after a long, exhausting day. Jennifer had told me she was going to meet some friend for dinner. She didn't mention any specific names, but she'd said it was just a casual night out. I wasn't in the mood for a social evening, so I decided to stay home. As the clock ticked closer to 7 p.m., I could feel my anxiety building. I knew tonight was the night. I had to face her. I couldn't let her keep lying to me. When she left, I knew where she was going. I had already checked her phone. Ethan was texting her again. "I'll see you tonight. Same place." My pulse quickened as I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door. I wasn't sure how I was going to approach the situation, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her think she could get away with this. No more pretending. The drive to the restaurant was quick, but it felt like a lifetime. My mind raced with a million thoughts, each one darker than the last. How was I going to confront her? What would she say? Would she try to deny it? I had all the evidence I needed, but something inside me told me to be careful. I couldn't let my anger take control. I had to stay calm, composed. I parked across the street from the restaurant, watching the entrance through the rearview mirror. The place was busy, filled with couples and groups of friends. Jennifer had always liked it here, cozy, intimate, the perfect place to have a quiet meal. But tonight it felt like a trap. I waited and waited. My nerves were getting the best of me. Then, at 7:45, she arrived. And she wasn't alone. The man walking beside her was Ethan. I could feel my blood boiling as I watched them. They were laughing together, their body language too familiar. She was leaning into him, her hand resting on his arm. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't some innocent friendship. This was something far deeper. Something they had been hiding from me. I couldn't sit in the car any longer. I had to confront them. But how? How could I face them both without losing my mind? I took a deep breath and opened the car door. My legs felt like lead as I walked across the street. Each step felt heavier than the last. As I got closer to the entrance, I could hear their laughter. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed the door open, walking straight toward them. "Jennifer," I said, my voice firm but controlled. She turned around in shock, her face pale as she saw me standing there. Ethan froze beside her, looking from Jennifer to me, unsure of what to do. For a brief moment, there was a silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. "Ethan," What the hell is going on here? I demanded, my eyes locked on Jennifer's. She took a step back, her eyes darting between me and Ethan. I could see the panic rising in her chest. What do you mean? She stammered, her voice too high-pitched, too defensive. Don't let her lie, I told myself. This was the moment. The truth had to come out. I know what's been going on, Jennifer, I said, keeping my voice steady. I know about you and Ethan. I've seen the messages. I've seen everything. Her face went from shock to anger in an instant. You've been snooping through my things? She hissed. I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. I didn't snoop. You left everything out in the open for me to find. I shot back. I trusted you. I believed in you. And you've been lying to me this whole time. Ethan stepped forward, his hand raised as if trying to diffuse the situation. Look, man, this isn't. But I cut him off. Shut up. My voice was louder than I intended, but I didn't care. You don't get to stand there like you're the innocent one in all of this. You've been sleeping with my wife behind my back. And now you have the audacity to act like you didn't do anything wrong. Jennifer's face twisted with anger, but there was also something else, fear. Fear of being exposed. You have no idea what you're talking about, she spat, her voice low and venomous. You don't know anything. You've been so busy pretending everything was perfect that you didn't even notice me slipping away. The words hit me like a punch in the gut. She was so casual, so indifferent, as if what she had done didn't matter. But I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. You're right. I didn't notice, I said quietly, stepping closer. I didn't see it, but I see it now, and I'm done being your fool. I turned to Ethan. I don't know what you think you're doing with my wife, but you've made a huge mistake. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, I shoved him hard in the chest. He stumbled backward, his hands instinctively reaching for the table to steady himself. Jennifer gasped. What the hell is wrong with you? She yelled. I'm done with both of you, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but with a finality that left no room for negotiation. I turned on my heel and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Jennifer and Ethan standing there. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I drove away, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I had confronted her. I had made my stand. But what came next? The drive home was a blur. My mind was reeling with 1,000 emotions, none of which seemed to make sense. I had done it. I had confronted her, finally forced the truth out into the open. But why didn't it feel like a victory? Why was there such a gnawing emptiness in my chest? Wasn't I supposed to feel empowered by my decision to take control? Instead, I just felt numb. As I parked the car in the driveway, the weight of the moment started to sink in. I wasn't sure what to expect when I got home. Would she be waiting for me? Would she try to apologize? Or was she going to act like nothing had happened? Would Ethan come knocking at my door, too, trying to smooth things over? I wasn't sure what I wanted more, answers or closure. What was the next step in all of this? I stepped into the house, and the silence hit me like a cold wind. The place felt empty. For the first time in a long time, our home didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a battleground, a place where everything had been torn apart. I made my way to the living room and sat down, staring at the floor, my hands trembling slightly. This wasn't the life I had imagined for myself. This wasn't how I thought things would end. I had loved Jennifer. I had trusted her more than anyone else. But now, I wasn't sure if I knew her at all. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. I turned, half expecting to see her standing there, looking contrite, ready to beg for forgiveness. But it wasn't Jennifer who walked in. It was Ethan. For a moment, I just stared at him, unsure how to react. Why was he here? What the hell did he want now? His presence only added to the sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. Wasn't he supposed to be the one hiding in the shadows, not barging in like some entitled fool? What do you want? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, though the fury inside me was building with every passing second. Ethan took a step forward, his hands raised in a peace gesture. Look, man, I didn't come here to fight. Oh, really? I sneered. Then what the hell do you want? You've already taken enough from me. You've destroyed my marriage, and now you're coming here to act like you've got the moral high ground. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly caught off guard by my response. No, that's not what I meant. I didn't want to hurt you. It's just, things happened. Jennifer, she She wanted it too. I clenched my fists. Don't you dare try to make it sound like you're some innocent bystander in all of this. You knew what you were doing. You knew what you were taking from me. But you didn't care, did you? Ethan's face shifted from confusion to something closer to guilt. But I didn't want his apology. I didn't need it. I was beyond needing anything from him. I don't care about your excuses, I said through gritted teeth. I don't care if she was the one who pursued you. You could have said no. You could have walked away. But you didn't. So, don't stand there pretending like you didn't know what was going on. Ethan stayed silent, his eyes cast downward. I could see the shame in his posture, but it wasn't enough to make me feel better. The damage had already been done, and no amount of guilt from him would change the fact that my life had been upended. Get out, I said coldly. I don't want to hear anything else from you. Get out of my house and don't come back. He hesitated, but after a moment, he nodded and turned to leave. As the door clicked shut behind him, I slumped back into the couch, my mind spinning in a dozen different directions. I had been right. I had confronted her. I had made him leave. But what now? What came next? What was the point of all of this? Jennifer was still out there somewhere, probably just as confused as I was, or maybe not. Maybe she had already moved on. Maybe this was just another chapter in her life that she would eventually close without a second thought. Maybe, just maybe, she never cared as much as I did. I heard the front door open again, and this time, it was her. Jennifer walked in, her face still flushed from the night out, but there was something different in her eyes. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was just cold. You're back, I said, my voice flat, my heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. Yeah, she replied, not looking at me, not acknowledging the elephant in the room. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her everything I was feeling, the anger, the hurt, the betrayal. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I stood up, my legs feeling weak, and I walked toward her. I saw everything, I said softly. Jennifer's eyes flickered, a hint of panic flashing behind them, but she quickly masked it. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice laced with false innocence. Don't lie, I said, my voice harder now. I saw the texts. I saw you with him tonight. You think I'm stupid? She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I could see her struggling, trying to figure out what to say, what excuse to offer this time. But I wasn't interested in her excuses. I had heard them all before. I had already been living her lies for too long. You don't get to lie anymore, I said, my voice steady, though every word felt like it was tearing me apart inside. I trusted you, Jennifer, but you've destroyed that trust. You've destroyed everything we had. And now I'm done. Jennifer didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me, her face unreadable. I could see the cracks in her facade, the guilt starting to seep through. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to forgive her. I had been betrayed, and now I had to face the reality of what that meant. The silence between us stretched longer than I could stand. Jennifer was standing in front of me, her expression a mix of guilt and defiance. But there was no apology, no regret in her eyes. She didn't say a word. And for a moment, I almost thought she was going to leave again, walk away from the wreckage she had created without a second glance. But instead, she took a shaky breath and spoke. I didn't mean for it to happen, she began, her voice low, barely above a whisper. It just happened. Her words hit me like a slap. I had heard enough of these excuses. It just happened. How many times had I said those same words in my head before? How many times had I convinced myself that things would go back to normal, that the trust, the love, the bond we had shared would somehow be enough to fix what was broken? But I had been living a lie, and now, standing here in front of me, Jennifer was repeating that same old refrain. No, Jennifer, I said, the anger rising in me once more. It didn't just happen. You made choices. You made decisions, and you went behind my back. You betrayed me, and now you're standing here, trying to justify it. She looked away, her eyes brimming with tears, but I wasn't moved by her emotion. Not anymore. I had been fooled once. I wouldn't let myself fall for it again. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice cracking. You have to believe me. I've been so confused. Ethan, you made me feel alive again. I thought it was just a fling, a mistake, but I didn't know how to get out of it. I didn't know how to stop it before it went too far. Her words cut through me like a blade. He made me feel alive again. What did that even mean? Was I not enough for her? Had I somehow failed her in ways that I couldn't even see? Was I the one to blame for the emptiness she felt inside? The pain was unbearable, and the more she spoke, the deeper it cut. Every word she said seemed to dig the wound deeper, exposing parts of me that I had never wanted to see, parts of myself I couldn't ignore any longer. "You don't get to make excuses for this," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You don't get to say that you didn't know how to stop it. You knew exactly what you were doing. You chose him over me, over everything we've built." She wiped away a tear, but it didn't seem to help. Her eyes were hollow, her face a mask of regret. "I know I've ruined everything. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to say." "You can't fix it," I said harshly, the words coming out before I could stop them. "You can't take back what you did. You can't undo the betrayal. No matter how many tears you shed, you can't erase what's been done." Jennifer stepped closer to me, her hand reaching out, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. Not when everything had changed. I felt sick, like I was suffocating under the weight of the lies, the secrets, the truth that was now out in the open. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. "The woman I thought I married, she's gone. You're a stranger to me now." The words felt like a punch to my gut. I wasn't sure if I had ever truly known her at all. All these years, I had trusted her, loved her, believed that we were building a life together. But now I was left standing in the ruins of it all. My heart was breaking, but the tears wouldn't come. The only thing I felt was anger, raw, unfiltered rage. "You think this is all about you?" Jennifer asked, her voice rising slightly, as if she were defending herself. "You think I wanted this? Do you think I planned on falling for him? It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "I don't care how it was supposed to happen," I snapped. "It happened, and now you have to deal with the consequences." Jennifer recoiled at my words, her eyes filled with shock. "You're not even listening to me. I never meant to hurt you, Mark." I shook my head, my jaw tight. "No, you didn't mean to hurt me. But you did. You did hurt me. You didn't think about what it would do to me. You didn't think about us. All that matters to you is you." It was clear now. She was trying to manipulate the situation, trying to make me feel sorry for her. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I wasn't going to allow her to play the victim when she was the one who had shattered everything. "I don't want to hear your excuses anymore," I said, my voice cold and firm. "It's too late for apologies. It's too late for any of it." Jennifer stood there in silence for a moment, looking like she was trying to gather her thoughts. But in that moment, I realized something. There was nothing left to say. The damage had been done. There was no going back to the way things were. No amount of talking, no amount of apologies was going to fix the trust that had been broken. "I don't know what to do now," Jennifer whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've lost you, haven't I?" I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a deep breath, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? Could I really walk away from her? Could I really let go of everything we had? The thought of starting over was terrifying, but staying in this toxic relationship was even worse. "I don't know what's left for us," I said, my voice quieter now, the anger starting to fade, replaced by a profound sense of emptiness. "Maybe we've reached the end." Jennifer's face twisted in sorrow. "Please don't say that," she begged. "I can fix this. I can make it right." I shook my head, the finality of it all sinking in. "No, Jennifer, you can't fix it. It's over." And with that, I turned away from her. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the right decision. I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so completely. No matter how much it hurt, no matter how much I still loved her, I knew I had to let go. The house felt empty as I walked out of the room, the silence settling in around me. And as the door closed behind me, I realized that I had finally reached the point of no return. There was no coming back from this. This was the end. The silence in the house was suffocating. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and the weight of the decision I had just made settled heavily on my chest. I had told her it was over. I had walked away from the wreckage of our marriage, and now, for the first time in a long while, I was alone. The house felt vast and cold, empty without the presence of her lies or her smile that had once felt like home. I didn't know where I was going or what I was supposed to do. Everything felt uncertain, like the ground beneath me was shifting, and I had no choice but to keep moving, even if I didn't know where I was headed. As I walked down the quiet street, the reality of what had just happened started to sink in. I had finally made the choice to leave her, to walk away from everything we had built together. It wasn't easy. It wasn't something I had wanted, but it was necessary. I couldn't keep living in a world where my trust was broken every time I turned my back. But the question that plagued me now wasn't just about Jennifer. It was about me. Who was I without her? What was I supposed to do now that the person I'd shared my life with was no longer the person I thought she was? How could I rebuild after the devastation she had left in her wake? The cold air bit at my skin as I continued to walk aimlessly, the weight of the situation pulling me down further with every step. I thought about the anger that had flooded me when I confronted her, how my words had come out sharper than I had intended, how I had tried to hold on to my dignity while she stood there, looking helpless and broken. But I couldn't stay angry forever. Anger had its place, but I knew I had to move beyond it. It was time to heal, even if that meant facing the pain head-on. I took a deep breath and stopped walking, standing at the edge of a park. The lights from the nearby street lamps flickered softly in the distance, casting long shadows across the ground. For a moment, I stood still, listening to the quiet rustle of leaves in the wind, trying to ground myself in the present moment. The truth was, I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. But I knew one thing. I couldn't go back to the life I had before. Not after everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the hurt. It was too much to ignore, too much to pretend had never happened. I needed to start fresh. But how? Where did I even begin? As the night stretched on, the feeling of emptiness grew. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew I couldn't live in the past. Not anymore. I turned and began walking back, my mind racing. What would I tell people when they asked? How would I explain this to friends and family who had known us as a couple for years? The thought of facing their questions, their pity, was overwhelming. But I had to face it. I had to face them, face myself, and figure out what kind of man I wanted to be moving forward. The decision to leave Jennifer had been hard. But now, the hard part was just beginning. The healing. The rebuilding. And as much as I hated the uncertainty, I knew it was the only path forward. As I reached my front door again, I felt a strange sense of resolve. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the first step toward finding it, toward finding myself again. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The house felt different now. It no longer held the warmth of familiarity, the scent of home, cooked meals, or laughter. The space seemed hollow, as if it were no longer mine, as if Jennifer had taken everything with her when she left. The memories that once filled this place now felt distant and cold, like echoes of a life that was slipping away. I stood in the living room for a long time, staring at the empty walls. The photographs that once adorned them now felt like distant reminders of a version of myself that no longer existed. Everything I had built, everything I believed in, had been shattered in an instant. The betrayal was still raw, still fresh, but I knew I had to move forward. I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I sat down on the couch, my hands resting on my knees, and let out a long, heavy sigh. The silence in the room pressed against me, the weight of everything I was feeling becoming too much to bear. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being able to handle anything life threw at me. But this was different. This was personal. The betrayal wasn't just about Jennifer and Ethan. It was about my own sense of self. I had trusted her with everything, my heart, my future, and now I was left with nothing but a sense of betrayal and emptiness. I had built my life around her, around us, but now I was forced to rebuild from scratch. I had to rediscover who I was outside of her, and I had no idea where to begin. I thought about reaching out to my friends, but the idea of telling them the truth felt too overwhelming. They would ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. They would want to know the details, the reasons behind everything. But the truth was, I didn't even know the answers. How could I explain what had happened when I still didn't fully understand it myself? I stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the dark street below. The world outside seemed so distant, so far removed from the chaos I was experiencing inside. People went about their lives, oblivious to the storm that was raging inside me. How could everything feel so normal for them while my world was falling apart? But I knew I couldn't keep dwelling on the past. I couldn't keep asking myself why Jennifer had done what she had done. The answers wouldn't change anything. I couldn't change her, and I couldn't change what had happened. All I could do now was move forward. The thought terrified me. Starting over felt like an impossible task. Where did I even begin? What was I supposed to do with the pieces of my life that were left? I went into the kitchen and made myself a cup of coffee. The act felt mechanical, like I was going through the motions of living without actually feeling alive. The coffee was hot and bitter, a reminder that life went on, whether I was ready for it or not. As I sipped the drink, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from my brother, Ryan. "Hey man, you good? Haven't heard from you in a while. Let me know if you want to talk." I stared at the message for a moment. Ryan had always been there for me, through everything. We'd shared our lives, our struggles, our triumphs. But this felt different. I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk to anyone yet. I didn't want to burden anyone with my pain, especially when I didn't even know how to deal with it myself. I texted back a simple response. "I am okay. Just taking some time to figure things out." I knew it wasn't the truth, but I wasn't ready to tell him everything. Not yet. Maybe one day, when I had it all figured out, I could explain everything. But right now, I needed time. Time to heal. Time to find myself again. After sending the text, I put my phone down and walked to the door. I needed to get out of the house. The walls were closing in on me, and I couldn't breathe. I needed to feel the world outside, to remind myself that life still existed beyond the pain I was feeling. I grabbed my jacket and left the house, stepping out into the cool night air. The city was quiet, the streets empty except for a few cars passing by. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving. I couldn't stand still. I couldn't let myself get lost in the pain, not when there was still a world to explore. As I walked down the street, I thought about Jennifer. I thought about the good times, the moments we had shared. For a brief second, I allowed myself to remember the person she used to be, the woman I had fallen in love with. But the thought was fleeting. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I couldn't let myself get lost in those memories, not when they were tainted by the truth. I turned a corner and found myself at the park. The trees were swaying in the wind, their leaves rustling softly. I sat down on a bench, staring out at the empty playground. It felt peaceful here, away from the chaos of my home, away from the reminders of what had happened. But even in the peace, the emptiness lingered. What was I supposed to do now? How could I move on from the life I had built with Jennifer? How could I rebuild when everything I had known had been destroyed? The questions lingered in my mind, unanswered. But for the first time in days, I allowed myself to breathe. I didn't have the answers yet, and maybe I never would. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep running from the truth. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. I had to face it head on. The road ahead would be difficult. The pain would linger. But I couldn't stay stuck in the past. I had to move forward, even if it meant facing the unknown. Even if it meant walking into a future that was uncertain, filled with questions I didn't have answers to. As I sat there, alone in the park, I made a decision. I was going to heal. I was going to find myself again. And no matter how hard it got, no matter how much pain I had to endure, I was going to keep moving forward. It was time to let go of the past. It was time to embrace the future. The sun was beginning to rise as I walked back home, the lights spilling across the empty streets, signaling the start of a new day. The air was crisp and clean, and with each step, I felt a little lighter. I had spent the night alone in the park, wrestling with my emotions, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. And though I hadn't found all the answers, I realized that perhaps it wasn't about finding them all at once. Maybe it was about taking small steps, one at a time, until I reached a place where I could breathe again. The truth was the pain was still there. I could still feel the ache in my chest every time I thought about Jennifer, about what had been lost. But I also realized something important. I wasn't defined by my past. I wasn't defined by her. I had a life, a future, and it was still mine to shape. When I walked back through the door of the house, it felt different. It was still empty, still filled with the ghosts of what had been, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a place I could begin to rebuild. It was a space, a starting point. The walls no longer held the weight of betrayal. They were just walls, and the air inside was mine to fill with something new. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom and splashed my face with cold water, trying to shake off the last remnants of sleep. My reflection in the mirror was still that of a man who had been hurt. I could see the exhaustion in my eyes, the signs of sleepless nights, and too much thinking. But beneath it all, there was a flicker of resolve, a spark that reminded me that I was still here, still breathing, and still capable of moving forward. I picked up my phone, looking at the few messages I had received since the night before. One was from Ryan, asking if I was okay. Another was from a friend who hadn't heard from me in a while, wondering if I want to grab a drink sometime. I thought about replying, but then I stopped. I wasn't ready to talk about it just yet. I wasn't ready to explain everything to anyone. I needed more time. Time to figure out how I felt. Time to find the strength to open up again. I decided to take a walk through the city just to clear my head. As I walked, I couldn't help but think about how strange it was to feel both empty and full at the same time. I had been betrayed by the one person I had trusted the most. And yet, in the aftermath, I was realizing that I still had the power to make choices for myself. That was something Jennifer had never taken away from me. She had tried to take my trust, my peace, my stability, but she hadn't taken my ability to choose who I wanted to be. And that was what I needed now. To choose how I would live in the wake of everything that had happened. Would I let this experience define me, or would I rise above it? As the day wore on, I realized that I wasn't looking for closure from Jennifer anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology, for some grand gesture to make things right. I had already made my decision. I'd already walked away. The closure was mine to create. It didn't come from her or anyone else. It came from within me. I met up with a friend later that afternoon, someone I hadn't seen in months. We grabbed coffee and talked about everything but the one thing on my mind. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of normalcy. I was still connected to the world, still capable of having conversations that weren't tainted by betrayal or heartbreak. But deep down, I knew that healing wasn't going to be quick. It wasn't going to happen overnight. It would take time, and it would take patience with myself. There would be moments when the pain would hit unexpectedly, when I would miss her, when I would wonder if I had made the right choice. But in those moments, I had to remind myself that I wasn't alone. I had people who cared about me, and I had the strength within me to keep moving forward, even when the road felt uncertain. As the days passed, I started to find my rhythm again. I focused on the things I could control: my work, my health, my friendships. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, people who reminded me that I was worthy of love and respect. I stopped checking my phone for messages from Jennifer. I stopped waiting for her to reach out, to apologize, to try and fix what she had broken. I realized that her actions no longer had the power to define me. There were times when I still felt a pang of regret. I still questioned whether I had made the right choice, whether there was something I had missed, something I could have done differently. But in the end, I knew that the decision to walk away was the right one. I couldn't keep living in a relationship that was built on lies. I couldn't keep holding on to something that was already broken. I had to let go. I had to give myself permission to move forward. The process wasn't easy. It never is. But each day, I felt a little bit stronger. Each day, the weight of the betrayal became a little less heavy. I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had forgotten. The parts of me that had nothing to do with Jennifer, the parts of me that were whole on their own. I knew it would take time, but I was no longer afraid of the future. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I had survived the worst of it, and I was still standing. The road ahead was mine to choose, and I would walk it with my head held high. This was my journey, and it had only just begun.